Hey guys, Domenic Nesci here from Cribs, and today we have the powerful Charles Estephen.
Powerful, I like that.
And I'm stealing some stuff from Joe Rogan these days. But mate, thank you very much for coming in. You're all the way from Schiavello. You're the state manager and looking after the shop over there and charged with its growth and managing a lot of their sites. And man, we had a very, very interesting conversation the other day, and you're just a massive property enthusiast with so much to share. I wanted our audience to hear some of your insights. So before we jump into that, can you just give a little bit of an introduction to yourself?
Yep.
Who you are, all that kind of fun stuff.
Well, so I'm currently at Schiavello Construction as the project director.
Yeah.
I have a background as an architect. Went over to the dark side of construction.
Yeah.
Got my builder's license and been in construction ever since. So sort of been on both sides of the fence, the design and the construction side, and now heavily in the construction refurb fit out game with Schiavello Construction. I guess I do have a passion for property, and also enjoy learning about property and ways that we can make the most of it. You know, and
Well, because it's interesting. You started off working at SJB many years ago, right?
That's right. SJB as an architect.
Adam Haddo, shout out if you're listening.
Ads, how you going, mate?
and you've been, and I find it really interesting that you started off into basically design, and then you moved into the construction, and now you're sort of managing sites. And what was captivating to me is, in the past 12 months, you went and bought a bunch of property.
Yeah, I've sort of gone on a bit of I've obviously been paying close attention to the market, and I think if there's any other time to buy, now's the best time. Just because of where things sit, I can't see anything going backwards from here. So I was like, let's do it. Let's make it happen. Obviously, it's one thing to sit back and constantly be analysing and studying and doing all your homework, but I guess until you make that plunge and do it, you got nothing, right? So I think it's the first step's the hardest. So I guess to everybody out there who hasn't made that plunge, just do it. I don't think there's a right time. It's just now. Now's the time.
It's good that you said that, because my first question is now a good time to get into the market? and you've obviously said yes, but let me add a caveat to that question and say, would you recommend purchasers wait and save a bigger deposit, and if that meant they had to wait 2 years or a year, or would you say get in sooner rather than later?
Well, look, like I said, I think it's time to get in now. There's never a right time. If people are waiting for the right time to have the right amount of money for their deposit, there's never a right time, I don't think. I think now is the time.
Yeah.
I like to quote my grandmother, because she's a very wise lady and made some great investments in property. And one of her great quotes is, God's not making any more land. So I guess to sort of sum that up, just getting a piece of land, you can't sort of go backwards from there.
Okay.
So in terms of a deposit, look, it's not about if you can or you can't, make it happen. Find a way, ask family, ask friends. There's always a way to sort of get that deposit. I think people make excuses by saying I can't, but how can I? Or ask the question, how can I, rather than I can't,
I like that. So you're saying that the better way to think about doing it is just basically push harder and try and get into the market as soon as you can. Yeah. And why urgency now? Why did you pull the trigger now, buy property and get in as soon as you could?
Well, I think that now is sort of a bit of I guess we all sort of found that this year was that everyone sort of said, the market's get dropped, now's a good time to buy and whatnot, from the highs we've had in the last couple of years previous. But I think, if anything, now that's the lowest it's going to get. That's my personal opinion. I can't see it going any more backwards, to be fair, in terms of just Sydney property prices. Obviously, all the new developments happening with the new airport, the new infrastructure. Sydney in itself, it's sort of, you want to get in, and the sooner the better.
I agree. I absolutely agree, because as you've just said, that there's so much infrastructure, the airport, the light rail, the metro, the second light rail, additional metro lines, schools, universities, roadworks. It's nuts. And we're just talking about the Sydney market now. I think that it's a really good time to get into the market. Obviously, people expect me to say that because I'm a property person, but it's good to hear someone else that, you're in design and construction and commercial real estate on another part of the property landscape, but you are very much advocating, but also purchasing yourself. You told me a funny story about how you kind of, you bought recently, and you felt you paid a little bit over what the value of the property was, but you bought it anyway. Can you explain a little bit like that? Because it's almost nonsensical to some person. But to me, I was like, that makes perfect sense.
Well, look, at the end of the day, I think it's all obviously got to be calculated. But paying a little bit over now, I'm not buying something to flip it in 6 months, right? It's something that perhaps I can add value to. So by adding value to the land, I'll get that 50 grand back. And just in time with the capital growth, I'll get that money back. So I think it's more about looking at it big picture rather than looking at it very sort of short-sighted and just thinking about, but tomorrow it's not good. But it's not about tomorrow. It's about, a year, 2 years. What value can I add to the property that's going to increase the value? I'll always look at that. I guess that's probably where my architectural background comes, is being able to see something from the beginning and then being able to visualize it at the end. So I guess I'm able to look at a property, for example, and rather than just see it as it is now, a blank canvas, I try to envisage it after I've painted my work of art on it and added that value to that canvas. And I think I think people need to have more of that open sort of minded look. And I think don't be so restrained by, the closed-mindedness of looking at real estate as something that's like, I don't know if it's the right thing to do. Like, obviously, calculated risk is very important. And we also discussed the personality types that goes along with taking risk, not taking risk. But you just have to, I guess, it's like you just got to do it,
I agree, because it's interesting. There's one area, I remember a little while back, I thought there was an area that was going to grow in value, and it was a previously light industrial area that had been rezoned. A lot of it was becoming residential. And I was taking clients out there and I said, listen, there's going to be a big train line out here coming soon. There's going to be a whole bunch of shops, this and that. And I was painting this forward picture about what it's going to be like in the next 5 or 6 years. And as I was going through this big spiel in front of a group of people, this rooster jumped out into the road and started walking and disrupting the group. And then there was some dogs, and there was a broken down truck down the road. And people were kind of disheveled and thrown off by how ugly and messy things were today. There were a few in that group that actually purchased. And I was very, very thankful and grateful that they did, because all the properties that they'd purchased ended up jumping 20 or 30% in the next 2-3 years. But it's interesting that you say that when you are assessing property, it's not with today in mind. It's always with 5-10 years. What can you add value, but what value will be added as a consequence of what's happening around it. Okay, let me ask you a bit of a personal question, but your experience in this space, but I cop it all the time. I have clients coming in and saying, Dom, I've got a deposit. My sister has a deposit. I want to purchase with my sister. Should we buy together or should we buy separately? I think that's an open-ended question that you can answer. You could buy together, yes, or you should buy separately, yes, as well. I know that you have experience in this. Can you talk a little bit about that and without going too deep into that and maybe annoying some of your family and friends, but just very from an objective point of view without offending anyone.
Well, look, I think objectively you look at it like, together, can we get ahead faster and quicker?
Yes.
So let's do it. Put your differences aside. Get the emotion out of it. Think about it from a logical sort of investment perspective. Okay, my brother and I don't see eye to eye on certain things, but together, are we going to be able to achieve more in a shorter period of time? And most of the time, the question is yes. Obviously, taking out, external influences like, depending on where they're at in their life, for example, if they're having a family, they're having kids, they're getting married, whatnot, that's obviously going to affect them in terms of their investment strategy. But as an overall looking at it, look, if it's going to help you get ahead quicker by being together, look, strength in numbers, right? Just like syndicates, you could do a syndicate for a small investment, although syndicates usually are on big investments. Why not do it for a small investment where everyone can put a piece of the pie in and then get a piece of the bigger pie later on? So I think there's pros and cons, but I would say why not? Just do it. You know, you probably got more to lose by not doing it. And at the end of the day, if it's going to help you get further quicker, you know, just go for it.
Okay, so, but let me then ask you another question. What are some of the difficulties? I think you alluded to some there, that when you are investing with family or friends, one of the biggest things that you need to consider is we all have different exit strategies.
Yep.
Or different things happen in your life where maybe you're having children or you're going to get married or something's going to happen, and someone in that partnership is going to say, I want to get out.
Well, I guess that's the point where you sort of say, look, I'll buy your share or get somebody else to buy their share. But you never know, right? So like with anything, there's always going to be a risk associated. But I guess does the opportunity outweigh the risk? Yep. That's what you've got to ask yourself. Ideally, you try and do things on your own just because at least you're in control. Yep. You know, you're not having to worry about somebody else's opinion or point of view or scenario, environment changing. But like I said, if something that you can help get ahead further and you put a good plan in place, there's pros and cons. Just got to weigh it up.
So to summarize what you just said, think about what the opportunity is.
Yep.
Have a plan.
Yep.
The risk assessment is consider, do you have the same goals, timeline, aspirations? Yep. And then how do you sort of get around that? If someone does want to exit or has something will come up,
perfect.
How do we mediate that risk?
Perfect, yeah.
But largely, there's strength in numbers. Go and purchase if you can do it together.
Look, why not? You know,
I like it. I've got another question for you. What areas do you think will see the best growth over the next 10 years?
Look, I
without giving away our little secrets.
Yeah.
No.
You know, I can't give away too much because then, you know, what's left for me? But I think at the end of the day, I alluded to just, I guess I can't talk for the rest of Australia, but Sydney itself, obviously there's a lot of infrastructure, a lot of stuff happening around the city, in the southwest, in the western suburbs with the airport. I think you could almost draw a triangle between the three sort of, you got your Parramatta, you got your Penrith, you got your Liverpool. If you were to draw a bit of a triangle there, I think anything within that triangle, you can't go wrong in terms of purchasing as an investment. Obviously, with the future airport, things are just going to happen. It might not be tomorrow, but in terms of a long-term play, you can't go wrong in those areas. That would be that's my personal opinion.
Well, your personal opinion has a lot of weight and strength because you've been in construction a long time.
Yep.
You're from the area. You've seen it change.
Yep.
And you've personally seen friends and family all do very well from what has already happened.
Well, I grew up in the southwest, a suburb called Bringelly. When my parents and my grandparents bought out there, everyone said, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
You're in the sticks. But now, they're doing a major road upgrades. We've got 4 lanes. The infrastructure, the train line's going out to Leppington now. So much has happened in, to be fair, a short period of time. When you think about it, over the last 5 years, so much has happened. I guess it's having that vision. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to vision. What is the next spot? Why is it the next spot? Try and put the pieces together. Obviously, there's always going to be risk associated, but it's about having the vision to look ahead. And I think my dad did that. My grandparents did that. They had the vision. They bought 25 years ago, and people said, you're crazy. Why are you buying out there? Mm. Now they're like, oh, you're so lucky you have land there.
Lucky,
but it wasn't luck.
No.
They had vision.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it comes down to. It's just having the ability to see past the present and looking into the future. Mm. And having the ability to see what value is going to be added. At the end of the day, mate, I learnt a lot from my family. My dad, my grandparents, my grandmother especially, she's a very smart lady. For her to come as a migrant to this country at, 17, 18 years old with 4 kids, not being able to speak a word of English, working 3-4 jobs, and then making an investment like that, it comes with having vision, and I think I've learnt a lot from them just because of the decisions they made, and I hope to do that for me and my future family to come.
Yeah, it makes sense. It absolutely makes a lot of sense. I mean, you're conscious of where the area is going, so you're saying that there's a lot of dramatic change to happen over the next 10 years. And people's lives are going to get better. So, look, I agree with you. That triangle is an especially good growth corridor. It makes sense, particularly if you're going to be buying land. I do like apartments. I do like townhouses, but I do love land. Now, let me ask you another question, because I know that this is a space that you are familiar with. Tell me a little bit about your experiences or opinions around buying land and doing small developments.
Yep. Well, again, it's the ability to have some foresight, and obviously with a bit of homework and research and whatnot. But it's about the ability to see something and see how can I add value. By adding value, as a simple example, which is very common now in the Sydney suburbs, is a duplex site. Very common. Perhaps it's probably not as feasible as it was maybe 10 years ago, because things the price of property has gone up and whatnot. But it's the ability to look and see what value you can add. So I think things are pretty tight for like duplex sites, for example, now, especially within the Sydney suburbs, the inner Sydney suburbs, because cost of construction, I think is probably at its all-time high, and that's probably because of a supply to demand type thing. A lot of construction has been happening over the last 5 years. Getting contractors, getting trades is getting harder. So you pay more for it, therefore cost of construction goes up. So back to the question of being able to sort of do a small development, I 100% agree with it. I think if you're able to add value, and add value to that piece of land by putting some sort of built form on it, why not?
Yeah. Do you think that it's a risky strategy? Is it for everybody? Yeah. Is it something that you should do for your first investment?
Look, I think there can be risk associated,
yep.
Especially if you're not from the construction sort of background. Not everyone's in construction. For me, I look at it, it's easy.
Yep.
I know how to build. I'll build it. I know it's going to cost me this much. It's not going to cost me more than that because it just won't. I'll make sure it doesn't.
You can assess all the planning risks, and it's all the paper that you have to do as well.
Exactly.
So I think I speak to a lot of clients that are ambitious and they want to go and build these significant portfolios, and they're in a big hurry. And I often say, listen, you need to slow down a little bit, because if you take too big a first step, you can really hurt yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yep.
If you're in a hurry and you go buy the wrong block and you do your feasibilities incorrectly, or if you haven't got the right amount of time or cash that you can put into a site, you'll go backwards.
And look, saying that, speak to the experts. Go talk to the right people. Speak to a town planner, speak to an architect, speak to a builder. Get advice. Speak to an agent involved with real estate. Get the advice. Get as much information as you can so you make informed decisions. Like with anything, there's going to be risk associated.
Certainly. That's why you're making money.
That's right. So it's a matter of how calculated that risk is and how much education you have behind the decision. Okay,
mate, that's good, prudent advice. So in summary, if you're going to go and do something like that, move off and do small-scale developments, duplexes, townhouses, it makes sense to go and consult all the advisors, your accountants, town planners, architects, buyers agents. Yep. Go and use the resources around you, and don't take that step until you've actually consulted all the right resources.
100%.
Last question, because this is your space, and I know that you work. In fact, shout out to the Commons where we are today. Yep. But your company actually did the refurbishment in here, and I love it.
Schiavello Construction did.
Yeah, you guys, you've done a fantastic job. Yep. Everything works, so
that's amazing.
Kudos to you. Everything's still in place. But I want to talk a little bit about commercial property and income-producing property. So a lot of the stuff that we've spoken about is that obviously we're thinking about capital growth and markets moving. But there's another asset of property where we're looking at commercial, industrial, where they're income-producing assets largely. And your company is very familiar with this space because
you work
with businesses to do refurbishments, and ultimately with commercial property, it's the rent that determines the value of the property.
That's right.
I mean, there's a lot of other things that come into it, but the larger the rent is, then you buy a portion to the yield.
That's right.
Can you comment a little bit about that?
Yeah. So as an example, right now we're doing a full refurbishment of a large hotel. Right. Obviously, by doing that, there's a large outlay of equity or cash up front to do that refurbishment, but it's a long play. It's a generating income from that asset that's going to make it all worthwhile. Obviously, commercial is less volatile than, say, a residential market. It's a better long-term play in terms of an asset that's going to generate an income. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're able to add a value in a smart way to increase that yield, like you just mentioned, you're only going to be adding value to the property. So in terms of a long play, commercial obviously is a safe investment. I guess if you can get in when you can.
Okay, so another thing that you're really you've touched on there is with commercials, probably not your first investment either.
No,
or even second.
No.
It's something that's a bit more of an advanced.
That's right.
Play. It's something that requires a lot more cash than a traditional real estate investment.
That's right.
And the opportunity lies in one, you need bigger deposits. It's harder to get the loans.
Right. That's right.
And then you also got to be willing to take some hits with commercial, because if it's untenanted, which is likely, the leases are longer. But if a business goes bankrupt,
that's right,
you're in dramas.
And again, higher risk, higher reward. And again, like you said, borrowing power, it's usually 30% deposit required for most commercial property from a bank. So you obviously need to come up with that cash. But long run, it's a safe investment for your money. So I guess you've got to crawl before you walk, and then walk before you run type mentality. Mm-hmm. But going back to the original point of, is it the right time? I think it's always the right time. Just from stories I've heard from family and friends, like, oh, we should have, we could have, we would have. It's like, you should have. There's no such thing. You just do it.
That pisses me off.
Nike, just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it, you know what I mean?
I think that's the thing that I hate the most. I remember as a kid sitting at after dinner, playing cards, whatever, having a coffee and listening to my uncles and aunties and my dad and whatever say, oh, do you remember when $5 was? Or do you remember when we could have bought, or we should have bought? Yeah. And that's just put this fire in my belly now when I sit across from clients like, don't fucking wait.
Just fucking do it.
Just go and buy. Get involved into the market. It's time in the market, not timing the market. And again, if you do have to pay a little bit more for the right assets, it makes sense just to go and push a little harder.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you have to beg, borrow, steal, don't steal, but go and ask your family, friends to get in, do the things that are necessary. It makes a lot of sense for you to go and do that, because I hate that. I should have.
I think it's a mentality thing as well. You just got to switch it from saying I can't do it to how can I do it? Because at the end of the day, if you plant that seed on how can I do it, you'll find a way. It's all like, obviously we can get into a whole conversation about the power of the mind and what the mind can achieve. But if you set your mind to say I can or I will, it's a lot different to saying I can't.
Absolutely.
Because it already puts up a barrier, and you'll always have that. But say, how can I? I'll find a way.
Well, you read a lot of books, from what I understand, and listen to podcasts and things. And what you're saying there is really interesting, because I've heard Tony Robbins talk about it, where we've got that reticular activating system, part of our brain, and it's like a pattern recognition software. So as soon as you start saying, how can I, it opens up your brain to start looking for solutions. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like when one of your friends buys a new Audi, you start seeing Audis everywhere. Yep. It's like your brain's looking for what it's hearing about. Absolutely. So if you just shift it from that fixed mindset to a growth mindset, that's Carol Dweck. Thank you, Carol, for your book. It's excellent. Potential opportunities start opening up. You start seeing ways to make it happen. You'll surprise yourself.
Well, I guess everyone, I don't know who hasn't, but Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yes.
If anyone hasn't read that, please, you have to read it.
Why do you like that book?
Because it although it gets into detail about investing in property and whatnot, but it's that fundamental thing of, rather than having the attitude of I can't, find a way. How can I? That's the basis of it, And I know it's easier said than done. A lot of the times people look and go, oh, bloody hell. It's easy to say, how can I do it and whatever, and I've got this and I've got that, I've got family, I've got partner, I've got this, I've got work. But I think people just have to have an open mind and be able to, again, visualize. I'm a big fan of meditation. Meditation helps me visualize what I want, both in personal, business, whatnot. It's ability to sort of have an open mind and don't close off any opportunity. Never say I can't, because once you said I can't, you will never will. No. By saying I will or how can I, like you said, the mind will find a way,
Well, thanks for the meditation room in here as well. I've used it a few times. Normally when I miss a deal or something, or something's stressing me out. But on that, let's just, one parting question for you. Are there any good books or podcasts or things that you've heard or listened to that our audience should listen to, watch, read, and that we can pass on to them?
Yep. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a very good book.
Connie, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's another good one. There's a few. What about if I send them to you and you send them out to the...
I'll put them in the show notes.
To the listeners. Yep, I'll give you a few good ones. There's some spiritual ones there as well. But look, I think knowledge is power. And keeping it... Look, I grew up in a very traditional sort of Lebanese family, you know, very... I guess they've set in their ways to a certain degree, my parents being that. And I think it's the ability to sort of take yourself away from that and look at things bigger picture, more holistically, and actually taking the time to have that inner conversation with yourself. Because I think a lot of the times, especially in today's society, we're so distracted. There's so many distractions. When do you have the time just to sit and talk to yourself? You know, it's I think that's very important, and that's aside from business and property and whatnot. But I think you've got to start with yourself and build on that, because at the end of the day, you as a person, your ability is endless, and I think we put too many restraints on ourselves these days, and constantly trying to challenge yourself is something that I'm very big on. Constantly looking for a challenge. If I'm not challenged, I don't know what to do with myself. You know?
Well, it's part of the reason why we're here today, right? We sat down, had a coffee, and you said, never done a podcast.
Yeah.
I said, mate, let's jump on. And without a second thought, you said, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, why not? But yeah.
Charles, thank you very much for your information today. It's been excellent.
Tom.
I really appreciate it. I will get those show notes from you. Connie will put them up for all of you out there. Thank you, and we'll catch you soon.
Thanks, Dom.
Catch you, mate.
Thanks, mate.